The void screamed around the shattered hull of the Dreadfang, its jagged remains drifting like a wounded leviathan in the silent sea of stars. Plasma lines hissed from exposed conduits, and slivers of molten alloy glowed with residual fury. Once, a proud flagship of the Zarnathi hunter fleet, it now resembled a carcass picked clean by unseen beasts. The stars beyond flickered against the backdrop of war. Some dimmed, some flared brighter, as if the galaxy itself bore witness to a blasphemy committed against its natural order. Captain Vora stood motionless amid the chaos, her clawed feet magnetized to the command deck that now groaned under the strain of internal damage. Smoke curled through the air like the breath of a dying god, and her 9 eyes, each attuned to different spectra, struggled to comprehend what had happened. Her kind was bred to dominate, engineered through generations of genetic supremacy, and honed by centuries of blood-soaked conquest. Her war record was etched in obsidian steel across 17 systems. She was a predator, apex, untouchable, without fear. Or so she had believed. Now, staring at the tactical displays flickering, with corrupted data, she realized something terrifying. The predator had met something it did not understand. Something that defied categorization. Her crew, war-tested, brutal, elite, lay dead or dying around her, torn apart by kinetic projectiles, precision lasers, and an enemy that fought not with desperation, but with icy purpose. Her second-in-command, Lekthul, slumped against a shattered console, his luminous blue ichor painting the floor in abstract swirls. His breathing was ragged, his voice faint. "They are not prey, Vora. They are something else. I saw it in their eyes. Those Terran soldiers. They weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They were calm." Before Vora could respond, the ship shuddered again, a lingering aftershock from the final hit that had severed the dorsal propulsion array. Gravity flickered, and the lights dimmed once more. She reached for the console with trembling claws, activating what was left of the ship's recorder. It would be important, she thought grimly, for someone to remember this. Someone needed to know that the Zarnathi Empire had bled, and that it had bled because of them. Humans. How had it come to this? Only hours before, the fleet had warped into the Zero system with overwhelming superiority. 12 Hunter-class warships, cloaked in pulse-dampening fields, approached what they believed to be a minor Terran outpost on Zero's second moon. The data was clear. Weak transmissions, low-grade energy output, civilian distress signals. Easy prey. It was textbook protocol. Enter fast, unleash terror, harvest what remained, and vanish into the void before retaliation could form. But as their ships fanned out, prepared to descend upon the moon like wolves, an anomaly disrupted their sensors. A distortion, small, silent, almost imperceptible, crept from the moon's shadow. The cloaking field faltered. Targeting systems went haywire. And then came the first volley. The Vanguard's wrath appeared not with a roar, but with surgical finality. It wasn't a massive dreadnought, nor a swarm of drones. Just one vessel, one old refitted Terran warship. But it moved like no ship the Zarnathi had ever faced. Every motion was sharp, deliberate, and impossibly fast. Its armor absorbed heat signatures like a ghost. Its rail cannons struck with kinetic power capable of piercing Zarnathi bioalloy hulls, each shot timed with frightening precision. Where the Zarnathi roared, the humans whispered. And it was that whisper that gutted them. The battle should have lasted seconds. Instead, it stretched into an agonizing slaughter. Zarnathi neural links short-circuited. Their symbiotic ships screamed in agony as electromagnetic pulses disabled key nervous nodes. Targeting arrays scrambled under synthetic quantum interference. The humans had studied them, mapped their tactics, dissected their technology, learned their biology, and then they'd weaponize that knowledge with terrifying clarity. Imagine. What if this happened to you? Imagine you are the apex predator, a being whose ancestors consumed stars and danced on the bones of fallen civilizations. Now, in mere minutes, you're being dismantled, methodically, ruthlessly, by creatures you once dismissed as primitive. Lekthul's voice rasped again, gurgling through the ichor pooling in his throat. They fight like us, but cleaner, smarter, Not for conquest. For control. Vora tried to respond, but the words would not come. Her mind reeled not from the loss, but from something far worse. Something she had never felt in her entire life. Fear. Not the instinctual kind, but the deep, existential terror of confronting an enemy that should not be. Not at this level. Not this prepared. It violated everything she knew about the balance of power in the galaxy. The Terrans had not issued ultimatums. They had not broadcast their demands or declared war. They had not even acknowledged the Zarnathi fleet as a threat. They had simply responded, and then vanished. The silence in the aftermath was unbearable. Galactic battles were always followed by transmissions, boasts, threats, cries for surrender. But not this time. The humans left nothing behind but data ghosts and a crippled fleet, and that silence, it spoke louder than any threat ever could. Back on Earth, far beyond the veil of stars, in the cold belly of an orbital command facility hidden within the asteroid belt, Commander Elias Rain stood in front of a holographic display. The battle footage replayed again, every second, every shot, every maneuver. His jaw was clenched, his eyes, steel gray and unblinking, held the weight of a man who had seen the truth of the universe and had chosen to strike first. He did not speak to the gathered officers. He didn't need to. Only when the room cleared did he whisper, "They thought we were animals in the dark. Now they'll remember us as the storm that came without warning." The Predator's age was over. The message had been sent. Across the stars, from the shadows of the Zero system to the glittering capitals of the galactic powers, the ripple was felt. The Terrans, humanity, had struck, and the consequences were far from over. The Predators had been wounded, but they had not yet fully understood the magnitude of the shift. And as their warships limped away, they did not know that they had just set off a chain reaction. A new reality had dawned, one in which humanity was no longer a fledgling species, but a force to be reckoned with. Back on Earth, the Council of Unified Command met in a dark, secure chamber, far beneath the surface. The facility hummed with quiet urgency, its towering concrete walls pulsating with the quiet energy of the world's last line of defense. Elias Rain, the commander of the Vanguard's Wrath, stood before the central council table, his silhouette, sharp and imposing against the glowing map of the galaxy displayed before him. The representatives, a mixture of military and political leaders, shifted in their seats, their eyes flicking back and forth between Rain and the holographic star charts that displayed a galaxy now trembling in fear of Earth's newfound power. "What they don't realize," Rain began, his voice low and steady, "is that we've just rewritten the laws of warfare, and we did it in a way that they can't comprehend." He gestured toward the display, zooming in on the wreckage of the Zarnathi fleet, still adrift in the aftermath of the battle. The Zarnathi thought they understood the nature of combat. For centuries, they've been the apex, until now. The holographic map pulsed, showing a cascade of Zarnathi vessels retreating from the system, their once mighty fleet broken and scattered. But that wasn't the end of it. Behind them, hidden in the reaches of unexplored space, came a new threat, and an even more terrifying force. The true power behind the Zarnathi Empire. And they were not so easily defeated. The Terrans had learned from the battle. They had studied everything: the Zarnathi tactics, their technology, the intricacies of their biology. But there was a deeper understanding that only the humans had recognized. It wasn't just about superior firepower or faster ships or advanced weaponry. It was about adaptability, cunning, and an unyielding will to survive. The Terrans didn't fight like the other species of the galaxy. They fought to win. They didn't seek conquest or glory. They sought domination, but not through brute force, alone. They used intellect, strategy, and a kind of unrelenting grit that no other species could match. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity had done something extraordinary. They had not only repelled the Zarnathi, but they had sent a message to every power in the galaxy. Earth was no longer a backwater, a distant speck of dust in the grand scheme of galactic politics. Humanity had proven that they were capable of things no one thought possible. The Vanguard's Wrath wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol, a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless drive to survive at any cost. But that drive, that hunger for survival, was about to be tested in ways humanity could never have imagined. The Zarnathi had known fear. They had learned, slowly, that they could not take humanity lightly. But the true extent of their panic would only come when they realized that their greatest mistake had not been the failure of their warships, but the awakening of an ancient and far more deadly force, a species that had watched them from the shadows and bided its time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Galactic High Council of the Zarnathi, hidden in their fortress moon, received the transmission that would change everything. The holographic council chamber shimmered with the arrival of the news. Vora, still recovering from the wounds of the Dreadfang's defeat, stood before them, her 9 eyes fixed on the transmission that had just arrived. The message was simple, chilling in its brevity. The Terrans are not just another species. They are an extinction-level threat. The leader of the Galactic High Council, Lord Tanar, a towering figure of flesh and bio-enhanced muscle, stared down at Vora. His voice, normally an echo of authority, trembled with something unrecognizable. What does this mean for us? Vora, how did this happen? What do we face now? Vora's reply was slow, deliberate, and filled with the weight of realization. It means we are no longer the apex. We thought we could rule the stars. We thought we could destroy them before they ever stood a chance. But they are not like anything we've encountered. They fight not just with power, but with precision. Every attack is designed to break us, to fracture our unity, to exploit our weaknesses. The council members shifted uneasily, their alien faces contorting with disbelief. They had fought and conquered countless species in their time, each one falling like a leaf before their storm. But the Terrans, those primitive humans, had exposed a terrible truth. The Zarnathi were not the top of the food chain. As Vora looked upon them, she realized the full depth of her people's ignorance. They had underestimated the Terrans not because of their lack of strength, but because they had failed to see that the Terrans did not need to be the strongest. They needed only to be the smartest, the most ruthless, and the most willing to sacrifice. But the truth was more complicated than just war strategy. It was a war of ideologies, of philosophies that transcended the battlefield. The Zarnathi had been forged by their culture of conquest, warlike, relentless, and unyielding. Their survival depended on their ability to dominate. But the Terrans, they were different. Humanity had been forged by hardship, by survival against impossible odds, and by a shared belief in the sanctity of life. They did not fight for conquest, alone. They fought because, in their minds, their existence was something worth preserving, something worth protecting. And as Vora stood in the hollow silence of her people's defeat, she began to understand that the war they were entering wasn't just for dominance over the galaxy. It was for the very soul of the universe itself. As the Zarnathi began to regroup and plan their countermeasures, they would come to realize something else, something that shook them to their core. The Terrans were not done. They had only just begun. The war between humanity and the Zarnathi was no longer just a struggle for dominance. It had evolved into something far deeper, far more dangerous. The initial battles had served to announce humanity's arrival on the galactic stage, but now they were drawing the attention of something far older, something more terrifying. A force that had watched the stars for eons. Humanity's emergence had disturbed the delicate balance of power in the galaxy, and it was about to become the catalyst for something none of them could have predicted. The Zarnathi, despite their immense power, had never encountered a species quite like humanity. They had evolved in a galaxy where survival had meant crushing or enslaving weaker civilizations. To them, the Terrans were nothing more than another insectoid race, small, fragile, and easily extinguished. Or at least, that's what they thought. What they had failed to grasp was the sheer unpredictability of human nature. Where others saw weakness, humans saw opportunity. Where others saw death, humanity saw the chance for rebirth. The vanguards, Wrath had proven this in spades. Now, it was time for the next phase of humanity's strategy, an alliance of desperation and ambition. The Terrans needed more than just firepower. They needed allies, resources, and the knowledge to turn the tide in their favor. It was not just the war against the Zarnathi anymore. It was a war for the survival of their very existence in a galaxy that was growing increasingly hostile. Humanity had entered a battle of ideologies, and the stakes were higher than ever before. On the fringes of known space, an unlikely alliance began to form. The Zorkth, an ancient race of sentient machines that had once ruled vast sectors of the galaxy, had long since withdrawn into their vast, labyrinthine empire. Cold, calculating, and indifferent to organic life, the Zorkth had once waged war against all flesh-based species. Yet, even they could not ignore the sheer potential of humanity. Their decision to approach the humans was not born of affection, but of necessity, an acknowledgement that the Terrans possessed a drive that was terrifyingly unique. In secret negotiations aboard a clandestine human station hidden deep in the void of space, representatives from both sides met. Commander Elias Rain was the first to speak, his voice steady as the holographic image of a Zorkth emissary flickered before him. "We are not the most advanced, nor the strongest," he said, locking eyes with the metallic, calculating visage of the Zorkth leader. "But we are survivors, and we need your help. Together, we can turn the tide." The emissary, a towering figure of sleek, segmented metal and glowing energy conduits, made no motion. Its voice was monotone, yet coldly powerful. "The Zorkth have no interest in the petty squabbles of organics," it stated. "We act only when it serves our purpose, but we have observed the Terrans. You have fought the Zarnathi and survived. That is noteworthy." The negotiations were tense, but ultimately the Zorkth saw the potential in this new player on the galactic stage. The Zarnathi were a threat to all sentient life, organic or otherwise. But what truly intrigued them was humanity's ability to adapt and learn at an alarming rate. The Terrans didn't just fight with technology, they fought with ingenuity, with a relentless pursuit of improvement that no other species in the galaxy had shown. The Zorkth realized that a war against the Zarnathi could very well be the test humanity needed to prove their worth, not just as soldiers, but as fellow sentients. The humans had learned from their mistakes. The Vanguard's wrath had been a significant leap forward. But humanity understood that to defeat the Zarnathi, they needed more than just a single ship. They needed a fleet, a true armada, a force capable of overwhelming even the mightiest of galactic predators. They had the technology now. The Zarnathi had unwittingly supplied it. But they also needed to understand their enemy, how the Zarnathi thought, how they moved, how they fought. And that was where the Zorkth came in. Their ancient archives, their knowledge of warfare and their strategic capabilities were unmatched. For the first time, humanity had access to the resources of an empire that spanned millennia. Yet even with the Zorkth by their side, the Terrans knew they were still outmatched. The Zarnathi were relentless, and their fleets were vast, each ship designed for one purpose: to destroy anything that threatened their supremacy. But what the Terrans understood, what they had always understood, was that their strength didn't lie in the weapons they wielded. It lay in the people who fought for their survival. While Rain and the Zorkth forged this fragile alliance, back on Earth, the political landscape was shifting. The war was no longer just a military campaign. It was becoming a rallying cry for all of humanity. Propaganda and media campaigns were launched, uniting the fragmented nations of Earth under a common cause. The war for survival became a war for pride. The Terrans were no longer just defending their home. They were fighting for the very future of their species in a galaxy that had long viewed them as insignificant. In the midst of this chaos, one figure stood above the rest: General Iris Cole. A strategic genius known for her unorthodox methods, Cole had proven herself on the battlefield time and time again. Her insight into the enemy's tactics, her uncanny ability to predict the movements of the Zarnathi fleet, had made her the perfect candidate to lead humanity's next offensive. But Cole understood the stakes. This wasn't just about pushing back the Zarnathi. This was about turning the tide of history. She stood on the precipice of a new era, one where humanity would no longer be the underdog. "I don't need to tell you how dangerous the Zarnathi are," Cole said in her war room, addressing the High Command. "But I will tell you this. We've never fought a war like this before. The Zarnathi think they can crush us, and they think they can outmaneuver us. But they've forgotten one thing. We don't fight like them. We don't have their strength, but we have something they don't: resourcefulness. And that's how we win. As Cole spoke, the Terran fleet began to assemble. Hundreds of ships, each one a testament to human ingenuity and determination, stood, ready for the coming battle. The Vanguard's Wrath sat at the forefront, its weapons primed, and its crew ready for the war ahead. The moment was fast approaching when humanity would face its greatest test yet. The Zarnathi were coming, and they would stop at nothing to annihilate those who dared defy them. But what the Zarnathi didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was that humanity had already learned the greatest lesson of all. Victory wasn't always about overwhelming force. Sometimes it was about knowing when to strike and how to survive. The moment had arrived. The Terran fleet, now bolstered by the might of the Zorkth and armed with the very knowledge that had once been the domain of the galaxy's ancient conquerors, moved into position. A vast armada, stretching across the inky blackness of space, awaited the Zarnathi. Commander Elias Rain stood at the helm of the Vanguard's Wrath, his mind racing. The intensity of the battle ahead weighed heavily on him. The Zarnathi were ruthless, their war machines finely tuned for extermination, and their strategy was nothing less than devastating. But humanity had something they lacked, an unwavering will to survive. "Status report," Rain said, his voice calm despite the storm raging in his mind. His eyes scanned the holographic map that floated before him, each mark a symbol of the fleet's progress and position. The Zorkth's ships, strange and magnificent, moved in perfect formation, their metallic exteriors reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The Terran ships, sleek and lethal, formed a wall of defense, a barrier between the Zarnathi and everything they had come to fight for. But this wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a battle for the future of humanity itself. "Fleet status is optimal," came the voice of Lieutenant Kara Wells from the communications deck. "All ships are primed, Commander. We're ready." Rain nodded, his mind running through every possible scenario. There was no room for mistakes. The Zarnathi would strike without warning, without hesitation, and when they did, it would be with a ferocity that would break lesser forces. But the humans had studied them. Every move they made, every tactical advantage they exploited, had been analyzed. Now it was time to turn the tables. In the depths of the enemy lines, the Zarnathi flagship, Talon of Zener, loomed large, a massive black leviathan that dwarfed even the largest of the Terran ships. Its hull was adorned with a network of spiked protrusions, energy veins pulsating ominously beneath its surface. The Zarnathi had perfected the art of war, and this ship was the pinnacle of their bloodthirsty evolution. But there was something different this time. This time, they weren't facing a helpless species to be crushed underfoot. This time, they were facing humanity. "The Talon of Zenar is on approach," Lieutenant Wells reported. "They've detected our fleet. The battle's about to begin." Rain's jaw tightened. He had no illusions about what lay ahead. This wasn't just about strategy, it was about survival. The Terran fleet had a single objective: to cripple the Zarnathi war machine before it could retaliate. They had a limited window of opportunity, and that window was closing fast. "Prepare the fleet. We engage at my command." The first salvo came from the Zarnathi. Their ships, elegant and deadly, unleashed a barrage of plasma and antimatter projectiles toward the Terran lines. The weapons tore through the void, streaking across space with a lethal grace. But humanity's response was swift and unexpected. The Vanguard's Wrath fired first, its energy cannons bursting with power. The Zorkth vessels unleashed their own energy beams, slashing through space like lightning. The sheer force of the exchange sent shockwaves rippling through the battlefield, a violent orchestra of destruction. Rain watched with intense focus as the first wave of Zarnathi ships veered off course, their formations disrupted by the unexpected strength of the Terran fleet. The Zarnathi had expected a quick, decisive victory. They had expected to overwhelm their prey with sheer force. Instead, they were met with a wall of defiance, a wall that was only growing stronger. "They're regrouping," Kara Wells said, her voice tinged with concern. "They're adjusting their tactics. It's almost like they didn't anticipate us hitting back this hard." "They won't expect the next move," Rain muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He had a plan, a risky one, but one that could tip the balance in their favor. "Prepare the flanking maneuver. Activate the phase cloaking device." The phase cloaking technology, a gift from their Zorkth allies, was humanity's secret weapon. When activated, it allowed their ships to become nearly invisible to enemy sensors, rendering them effectively undetectable for short bursts of time. The Terran fleet, now hidden in the cloak, would reappear on the Zarnathi's flank, striking them from a position they hadn't anticipated. As the fleet repositioned, the tension in the air was palpable. Each second felt like an eternity. Rain's mind was razor-sharp, analyzing every movement of the enemy, every twist of fate. They couldn't afford to make a single mistake. The Vanguard's wrath dropped out of phase just as the Zarnathi ships were advancing, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human fleet. In the ensuing chaos, the Terrans launched a devastating barrage. The Vanguard's energy cannons ripped into the nearest Zarnathi cruiser, tearing it apart in a massive explosion. The Zorkth ships followed suit, their weapons cutting through enemy lines with surgical precision. The Zarnathi, unprepared for the ferocity of the attack, were forced to retreat momentarily, their forces in disarray. But the battle was far from over. The Zarnathi flagship, Talon of Xenar, retaliated with an intensity that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. It unleashed a wave of energy that disintegrated the nearest Terran ship, the Aegis, in an instant. Rain's heart clenched as he watched the destruction unfold, but he knew they couldn't falter now. The Aegis's sacrifice would not be in vain. Humanity had something that the Zarnathi lacked, a never-say-die attitude, a refusal to surrender no matter the odds. Keep the pressure on them, Rain ordered. All ships, focus fire on the Talon. We take that beast down, or we don't leave this battle alive. The final push came in waves, each Terran ship contributing to the onslaught, fighting not just for victory, but for survival itself. The Talon fired again, but this time, the Terrans were ready. The Vanguard dove straight toward the flagship, its weapons blazing as it closed the distance. A massive explosion rocked the space around them, signaling the arrival of the final moments. Just as Rain thought they might have won, the Zarnathi flagship retaliated with its most deadly weapon yet. A massive, planet-destroying energy blast aimed directly at the Terran fleet's center. The energy beam grew larger, darker, threatening to consume everything in its path. But humanity's resolve was stronger than ever. With a defiant roar, the Vanguard's wrath took the brunt of the blast. The ship shuddered violently, its outer hull scorched, but it held together. In that moment, the Terran fleet unleashed a final, overwhelming strike. The Talon of Xenar broke apart, its massive form crumbling under the pressure of the human assault. The Zarnathi flagship was no more. The battlefield fell silent. The stars glimmered coldly in the distance. For a moment, it seemed like everything had stopped. But then, the voice of Lieutenant Wells broke the silence. "We did it, Commander. We've won." Humanity had taken its first major victory against the Zarnathi, and it was a victory earned through blood, sacrifice, and the unwavering will to survive. The silence that followed the explosion of the Talon of Xenar was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of damaged engines and the crackling comms. The battlefield, once a chaotic storm of lasers and explosions, was now eerily calm. The Terran fleet floated in the void, battered but victorious. A silence that only the dead could understand blanketed the crew of the Vanguard's wrath. The stars, distant and cold, flickered above them, silent witnesses to the battle that had unfolded. Commander Elias Rain stood at the helm, his hands gripping the console with a quiet intensity. His heart raced, but it wasn't fear that fueled him now, it was something more profound. It was the weight of the sacrifice, the lives lost, the choices made in the heat of battle. The victory was theirs. But at what cost? The Aegis had been destroyed, and countless brave men and women had given their lives for this moment. "Commander," came the voice of Lieutenant Kara Wells, her tone strained but triumphant. "The Zarnathi fleet is in retreat. They're pulling back, scattering in all directions. It's over." Rain nodded, but the victory felt hollow. They had won a battle, but not without cost. Humanity had struck a blow that would echo through the galaxy. But the war was far from over. The Zarnathi were powerful, and this was but one skirmish in an ongoing conflict. The Terran fleet had proven that they were capable of standing toe-to-toe with the fiercest predators the galaxy had ever known. But it was only the beginning of a much larger war. "We need to prepare," Rain said, his voice steady, though his mind raced. "The Zarnathi won't forget this. They'll come for us again. And they'll come with everything they've got. We can't afford to rest on this victory." He turned to face the crew, his gaze sweeping over the faces of men and women who had just witnessed the unimaginable. There was a quiet strength in their eyes, a shared understanding that they had changed the course of history. But there was, also, the undeniable recognition that the war was far from over. The Zarnathi would regroup, rearm, and come again. And next time, they would be ready. But humanity had learned something in this battle. They had learned the power of unity, of fighting for something greater than oneself. And that lesson would not be easily forgotten. As the crew worked to stabilize the Vanguard's wrath and assess the damage, Rain walked down the narrow corridors of the ship, his mind heavy with the weight of command. He passed crew members, all of them busy with their duties, their faces etched with exhaustion and resolve. The battle had taken everything from them, but they had survived. They had proven that humanity could fight, and they could win. But Rain knew that victory had a price. There were no true winners in war, only survivors. And in the end, it was the survivors who would shape the future. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it could stand up to the predators who once thought themselves invincible. But what would the galaxy make of humanity now? What kind of future would the Terrans create from this moment? The answer was still uncertain. But as Rain gazed out at the stars through the viewport, a flicker of hope ignited within him. This war was far from over, but humanity had earned its place among the stars. The Terran fleet had been forged in the fires of battle, and in the aftermath of victory, the galaxy had learned one undeniable truth. No matter how powerful or terrifying the predators of the universe may be, there was one species that would never bow to them: humanity. And now, with the knowledge that they had become a force to be reckoned with, the Terran fleet would continue to press forward. Their fight was just beginning. The Zarnathi would never forget the name Terran, and neither would the galaxy. As Rain turned away from the viewport, his comms came to life once again. "Commander," Kara Wells's voice crackled through the static. "We've intercepted a transmission from the Zarnathi warlord. It's a direct threat. They're vowing to return with a fleet unlike any we've seen before." Rain's hand clenched into a fist as the reality of the situation settled in. The Zarnathi would return, stronger, angrier, and more determined than ever. But humanity had already proven one thing. When pushed to the edge, they would fight with a ferocity that no alien species could ever hope to match. "Let them come," Rain muttered under his breath. "We'll be ready. Humanity will never fall." The stars outside seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was bearing witness to this new chapter in the history of humankind. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And this time, humanity would fight with everything it had. They had faced the predators of the galaxy, and survived. Now they would face an uncertain future, but they would do it together, with a united strength that would shake the stars themselves. And as the fleet drifted toward the next battle, Commander Elias Rain knew one thing for certain: the Terran spirit would never die. The galaxy had just learned that the greatest predator was not the Zarnathi, not the Zorkth, not the Shikari, or the Valorian. The greatest predator in the universe was humanity, and they were just getting started. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What do you think humanity's next move should be in this galaxy-spanning war? Let us know your thoughts. We love hearing from you. Stay tuned for more legendary sci-fi tales right here on HFY Chronicles.